So thank you, Brian.
You're welcome.
First question I want to ask to you is, could you introduce yourself to our readers?
Yes. My name is Brian Evenson. I'm a writer of fiction. I've also written some TV as well. And I live in the United States. I live in Los Angeles, but currently I'm living for the next 6 months in Germany. I have had in America around 24 books of fiction published. In France, maybe 1.5 dozen, 15 or 16 books, maybe a little more. And the most recent one is just coming out right now.
Yes, I see it. It's I will remember Fantôme Limb. Yes. But just before talking about this one, I read several books from you,
yes,
including Immobility and the Warren.
Uh-huh.
I felt that I have the feeling that the two books, the two novels, are in the same universe, the same time frame. Is it the case?
It's kind of the case. I think they're in the same universe, but also like the universes are slightly different. So I would say they're overlapping universes, almost the same, but not quite the same. But you can read it as potentially one is in the universe earlier than the other one is in the universe. So, but yes, I think there's definitely connections and very deliberate connections between those books.
And about Immobility, what I feel is it's a question of identity. Yes. The guy is tracking his identity.
Yes.
And I feel that I have the feeling too that this question is often present in your book.
Yes, I think I often am exploring questions of identity. I have a lot of characters who are not sure who they are exactly, or are trying to understand both who they are and what they should do. So there are these questions, ontological questions that are raised in my fiction quite often. And so yes, my characters are often very confused about who they are and what they should do.
And yes, and in the same Immobility, we have these twins.
Yes.
And it's a question of what are people doing for the community, and they don't exist themselves as individuals.
Yes. Yes, so there's two twins who have been manufactured. They are in some senses cloned or artificial. The book isn't necessarily very clear exactly about what's happened. I leave it to the imagination. But they see themselves, they've been trained to think of themselves as part of the community, and that's their chief role. They need to do things to help the community. And when they meet the main character of the book, he begins to introduce doubt to them, begins to make them think, maybe I can have a sense of myself as a human outside of the community. And I grew up as a Mormon in the Mormon Church. I'm an excommunicated Mormon now, and I think I grew up in a church where the sense of community was very, very strong. And then I left that and had to figure out what it meant to live outside of it. So maybe that's where that comes from. I don't know. And
this point is interesting because it was a question that I have for later. Your past in this community as a high influence in your writing novel?
I think it has an influence on some of the books. I think it's an influence that's not direct. It's more at an angle or slant. But I think it does have an influence in terms of I'm often speaking about individuals and their relationship to communities that are sometimes controlling. The communities tend to try to control the individuals who are part of them. And so those questions of authority and individuality and what it means to be a person and what it means to be a particular person are all things that I feel are coming from the place that I came from, the religion that I grew up in and that I left.
And around these people, I felt more in the Warren that you are questioning about what is to be human, because there is a question between people and human. Mm-hmm. Does this question become more and more relevant with the coming of EA and robots and so on?
Yeah. Yes, it's something. It's a question. The question of what it means to be human is something that's occupied me more and more. The last book that I published, the most recent book I published in the United States, is a story collection called Good Night, Sleep Tight. And many of the stories in that book are about robots or artificial humans or artificial intelligence that seems to be trying to figure out what it is or what it means. I think it's very hard not to think about artificial intelligence or AI at this particular moment because it's so present in ways that we don't always see very much. But it's something that's hard to ignore at this point. And so I find myself thinking more and more about it. I mentioned earlier to you that I had last year, someone made a fake book of mine using AI and was selling it on Amazon. It wasn't a very good book, but they used my name and it took forever to get that book taken down. And one of the things that we discovered, which I think you know as well, when we were trying to get the book taken down, Amazon would say things to us like, oh, it's okay. We only let people submit 3 books a day. And, it's crazy to think that somehow is acceptable, the idea that someone could use AI to write 3 books a day. So I think as especially in the United States, where there are less guardrails on AI than there are in Europe, I feel like there's more and more tension related to AI, and I think people are I think it's a subject that's going to occupy us more and more. And I hope we get it under control before it kind of takes over everything.
Yes, if not, it will be Skynet.
Exactly. Yes, we're on our way to Skynet very soon if we're not careful.
You are saying that you have just published short stories, if I correctly understood, and we have in France a song for the Unraveling of the world.
Yes,
and I was surprised by the different subjects that has been addressed.
Yeah.
How do you imagine all this stuff?
I've always had a very fertile imagination and an ability to imagine just very different sorts of things, which is very helpful. But then also, I feel like when I sit down to write a story collection, I'm not thinking I'm going to write science fiction stories or horror stories or fantasy stories or literary stories. I have certain ideas I want to explore, and sometimes it works to explore them through horror fiction. Sometimes it works to explore them through literary fiction, and sometimes there are gaps in one exploration that can be filled by another way of looking at it. And so I've found it useful to say, all right, I have certain ideas, and what happens if I start to explore them in these different genres? And so my books hold together in a very different way than many people. My books of stories hold together in a different way than many people's books of stories do, because there's a thematic connection, but there's also loose connections between the stories, and then the genre can change from story to story as well. But hopefully they still feel like they all belong together.
And if we met today, it's because you have your new novel that will be published, but it will be after when I will publish the interview.
Yes,
that is Fantôme Libre. That is the following of the Brotherhood of Mutilation.
Yes,
in the same universe. We find again Klein.
Yes,
I have not read this one, but I succeed to read without any difficulties. This one, the second one.
Exactly.
Yeah, do you want this?
Yes, I think you can. I tried to write it in a way that it could be either read as a sequel to Last Days or La Confrérie de Mutilés, the Brotherhood of Mutilation, or that it could be read on its own. And both of these books are what I refer to as kind of weird noir. So they're in a kind of noir or polar space, polaire, and are kind of moving in, taking those ideas and moving them just in a strange direction that is kind of horror-based as well. That book, Membre Fantôme, Phantom Limb, is being published in France before it appears in America. It won't appear in America till 2026, and so this is actually the first edition, which I'm very happy about.
So it will be the interview will be published prior the publication in the United States.
That's right.
A good idea.
Yeah.
And it's a very strange brotherhood, in fact.
Yes, it is a very strange brotherhood. Yes, it's in both books have a religion called the Brotherhood, and they believe that one of the ways in which you can become closer to God is by having less of your physical self. And so they advocate, removing parts of your body. And it's based on, a scripture in Matthew, in the Bible that says, if thy right hand offend thee, then cut it off. And they take this very literally and have a kind of ranking according to who, has removed the most of themselves as well. And the main character is a detective named Klein, who has kind of stumbled into the situation and is trying to figure out what to do or how to cope with it.
Yes, because in fact he was not a real member of this brotherhood. He just lost his arm. In fact,
no, he accidentally lost his arm, and as a result, he came to their attention. And before he knew it, he was struggling not to lose more of himself. And you find out whether he succeeds or not in both of those books.
And I find this very funny. I'm not sure that's funny is the real word, but to discuss with someone that is a two, we
yes.
need to be two, and we have a kind of hierarchy of horror.
Yeah, there's a kind of hierarchy that's there. So if you have cut off 2 fingers, that you're a 2. If you've cut off 3 fingers, you're a 3. But there's a lot of debate within the Brotherhood about, okay, what if I cut off my hand? Instead of cutting off 5 of my fingers, then I'm only a 1. And there's a lot of discussion about what what the ethics of counting people's amputation should be. But yeah, I mean, I feel like the way in which it talks about those things is very much tied to how people in religions often debate tiny points of doctrine. And I do think it's funny, but in a very absurd sort of way. The humor is very, very dark, or black humor, I suppose.
And when we read the book, we follow Klein and some of other
yes.
of the Confrérie.
Yeah.
And we just forgot that half of the population is not represented in this religion, in fact.
Yes, right. So in the first book, we have a kind of representation where, since it's a brotherhood, we see all the men in the religion. We have very brief glimpses of the women. And then the second book is exploring, Membre Fantôme is exploring this group, which is all women, or primarily almost all women, and their way of kind of approaching these same questions, which is a very different kind of approach, a different way.
And today, you're writing around the faith, and is it not complicated in the actual context to discuss about religion or this kind of stuff?
Well, I mean, it's a strange moment to be talking about religion. I mean, because of some of the things that are going on with, especially in the United States at the moment, with the politicization of faith. I feel like when I was writing these books, my tendency was to try to have them present their beliefs, even though they're quite strange beliefs, as honestly and as straightforwardly as possible. So to take it seriously in some ways. But I think that my guess is that the people who are talking about faith in the United States, in particular the Republican Party, that they would recognize my book as they would see it as kind of an abomination rather than as something that affirms faith.
Nevertheless, I find that when we follow Klein, when we follow this story, we ask ourselves about
yes.
our regard, our vision of the world, how we interact with people. This seems to be a key point for you. To this,
it is a key point, and I think that Klein is seriously. He's in a situation that he didn't create for himself, but now that he's in it, he's trying to think about, what is this situation? What does it mean? What do I do? And part of it is that a part of him, and it's a very small part of him, has can see the point of what these people are doing. He can see their sincerity. He's and he likes some of them as well. There's several members of the Brotherhood that he becomes very close to as time goes on. And so in that sense, I mean, I think it's a book that's trying to take seriously, what do you do when you're confronted with someone who is quite different from you, who at the same time wants to be connected to you, and how do you deal with it? And I don't know that I have a good answer for that. It's a very hard question.
And you are in France today, and for some days,
yes,
you go, if I correctly remember, at the Imaginal.
So I'm going to be at Imaginal, which is at the end of this month, I think.
Yes.
And then I'm here in Paris for just another day or two. There's actually a conference at one of the universities in Paris on my fiction. And so I'm going to go and listen to scholars talk about my fiction. And then we go back to Berlin for a few days, and then I come very quickly back to France. We like France very much, and I used to live here, and so it's always very good to be back.
And I know, because we have discussed just before this interview, that you are speaking French.
Yes.
Do you want to say something for your French readers?
Sure, I can try to say something. Bonjour, je suis très content que j'ai des livres qui sont publiés en France. Et j'espère que si vous trouvez Membre Fantôme, que ça vous plaît.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.